Should the Chicago White Sox consider trading Luis Robert Jr. this offseason? Let's discuss why this is not the right time next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, USA Today's Bob Nightingale reported that the front office would love to unload Luis Robert Jr. I'll discuss in the first segment why that's bad timing. Then the Athletics' Andy McAuliffe wrote about a sneaky free agent addition the Sox could make that I'll discuss in the second segment. And then finally, I'll wrap up the show with a minor league Monday recap and discuss if former first-round pick Jacob Gonzalez is trending toward being a bust. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, this is not the offseason to trade Luis Robert Jr. Not if you want to get pennies on the dollar for him, because that's what his value is right now. You are not going to get anywhere close to 100% and even 100% plus markup for a guy like Luis Robert Jr. Now, I get why the Sox front office wants to trade him, and I'm just speculating here, but it's probably because it's not just that, hey, he's an asset that they want to offload to get more impact prospect bats. It's because there's a real chance they might be forced to let him go for nothing, much like they did with Yoan Moncada this offseason. You know, if he has another injury-riddled season, especially if it's a 224 average, 84 WRC plus, 14 home runs, and a .5 FWAR like he put up this season, I don't think you're picking up the $20 million option for 2026, especially when the buyout is just $2 million. And yes, you and I do have to come to grips that this is not only a make or break season for Luis Robert Jr. when it comes to reclaiming his value, it's a make or break season for him being on the south side. You know, I think that's getting overlooked that, well, he's one of the few, very talented players that the Sox have, but he's also, again, a very injury prone player. And if he's not in the lineup for more than 100 games, are you really going to give him another $20 million in 2026 and then even another $20 million in 2027? I don't think so. And that also, in my opinion, why I think the Sox front office is motivated to trade him this offseason is from what Bob Nightingale recently wrote. This is what he wrote. The White Sox will definitely trade Ace Garrett Crochet this winter, but before they move him, they'd love to unload Robert. Robert, 27, is a huge talent that prompted the White Sox to give him a 6-year, $50 million contract 5 years ago, but he's never lived up to the hype. So you think about it, he has lived up to the hype for at least one season, and then when he was healthy, you could see the tremendous talent that he had a 284 average in 2022. But again, he's usually never available. And you do have that $20 million option coming up in 2026. And in terms of, I don't want the Sox to settle for pennies on the dollar. And I think that's where they're foolish. I understand probably why they want to trade him. They think he's a very high valued asset, even though he's only a high valued asset to the White Sox, because sounds like every other team in the big leagues realizes he's only had one good season. This is a quote that Nightingale had from one unnamed GM. Quote, "The guy is certainly intriguing, but they've got a really high price tag on him. You've got to hope he finally stays healthy and can be the player everyone envisioned all along. But the White Sox are acting like he's some big star center fielder and are asking for your top prospects," end quote. Now, yes, the talent that Luis Robert Jr. has when it comes to how he can impact the game at the plate and in the field, and we have seen some evidence of that, would mandate, hey, you should give me your top prospects. But what you saw in 2024 and what you've seen outside of 2023, if I'm the GM on the other line, I'm going to be like, look, he's only had one season. That's it. It was a very fine season, but I can't count on him to be healthy, and I can't count on him to be consistent. This is not his peak trade value right now. His peak trade value was after the 2023 season when he was a 4.9 FWAR player hit 264 with 542 slug, 128 WRC plus, and 38 dingers. But the White Sox were going to trade him then because they still, they needed a draw at the gate because that's what he was in 2023. He was a draw. He was a guy that you wanted to see play. And it's sad to see how far he's regressed because, that's what injuries and losing has done to him. And he also played in 145 games in 2023. That's when he was probably at his peak value. That's probably when you should have traded him last offseason. I don't know why Chris Getz didn't even consider it, especially when he said he didn't like our team. Everybody then should have, hindsight being 2020, everybody should have been available in the trade market. Last season was the second time he ever played 100 games, and it was 100 on the button as that hip injury he had wiped out 62 games for him. And that keeps being the problem for him on the trade market, staying healthy in just one season where he reached his potential. That's it. If you're Chris Getz, that's all you can offer. And no team is giving up a top prospect for that. I mean, I could see his value being for mid-level prospects, as Nightingale writes. He simply can't stay healthy. Robert has played more than 100 games in just one of 5 seasons and now will be earning $15 million in the 6th and final season of that deal. Yet, if you gamble on Robert and win, you'll have the option of picking up his club option of $20 million in 2026 and again in 2027. So it's a bet. And if you're the 29 other teams in the major leagues, are you going to make a bet where you're going to give up one of your top 3 or 4 prospects? I don't think so. Or that's all you're getting. If I'm a team on the other end of the phone. And again, people, can I put an asterisk here? You have to give up something to get something in return. And it's both ways. I one of the things when I do content creation that just drives me mad and up a wall is it's either our side or the other side that's like, no way, not giving that up. It's like, look, on our end, we have to accept that not every team is just going to be like, yep, I'm giving up my top prospect. On the other end, other teams, you got to accept that your team is not just going to get a player for free. You have to give up something to get something in return. Okay? What you want to hope is you give up a Trace Thompson when he's at his top of his, value, and then he turns out to be a bust. That's what you want. You want to fleece the other team. But it just drives me nuts when they're like, I'm not doing that move, whether it's our side or the other side. It's like, you're going to have to do something if you want to make a trade. It just doesn't happen for free. It's not like, oh, here, I'll give you Luis Robert Jr. That's what free agency is called. And that's what happens when either a contract is non-tendered, contract expires, or a player is cut. Okay? There's my PSA. So before you're like clutching your pearls on that, just always, before you get upset, before you feel the need to comment on Twitter or YouTube, just remember, you have to give up something to get something. That's how trades work. And that's why it's better to just hold on to him and then roll the dice to see if he can stay healthy and recapture his 2023 form. That would be what I would like to do. And if you have that, then you can dangle an all-star player with $40 million owed to him for the next 2 seasons. Think about that. If he can recapture his 2023 season, have a bounce-back season, if he can flush out, I hate when Pedro said flush, but if you can flush out that 2024 season, flush out all that losing, come back refocused and re-energized, play like he did in 2023, stay healthy, at the trade deadline, you will have an all-star player owed only $40 million, and he'll be 27. That would be high peak value. It's a gamble because, if he's not healthy, you're potentially looking at the risk of having to let him walk away for nothing. And also, sorry, folks, you're going to have to abandon any hope of an extension if he plays like he did in 2023. As one, you and I know owner Jerry Reinsdorf is not going to pay him the contract over $100 million. He's just not. And Robert Jr. is represented by Scott Boras. So even if Jerry was finally like, this is the guy, let's say LRJ replicates what he did in 2023. And Jerry finally says, this is the guy that I'm going to give a $100 million contract or more to. And they're not going to take it because he's represented by Scott Boras. He's going to free agency. Boras gets his guys to free agency. Even if he's going to be 30, when he's eligible for free agency after the 2027 season. Scott Boras has taken Luis Robert Jr. to free agency. I'm 99.9% certain. So you're not going to get an extension. So that's another reason why it's better to just roll the dice and see if he can reclaim his value when it will, get back to that peak value, trade him at the trade deadline. Because you're going to probably have to trade him at the trade deadline because, again, you're not going to get into an extension by the time you're ready to compete, which at the earliest is 2027, which would be the final year of club control. They're basically just two guys crossing paths. That's the other reason. Just two crossing paths. And also, I keep saying, Luis Robert Jr. is more of a complementary piece in your lineup. Very talented. But he's not a foundational player. You saw that now in 2024. You cannot trust him to be healthy. You cannot trust him to be a foundational player. And even then, you saw, the losing has gotten to him. Foundational impact players play well through no matter what the environment is. Bobby Witt Jr. produced during a 100-loss season. And then obviously they got better. But, during 2 seasons of bad, he produced. Luis Robert Jr. has only produced 1. And he was terrible last year. The guy can crush some home runs and field his position well. But as you saw with the inconsistency and the injuries, he's just not face of your franchise material. So unless you're going to get a benevolent offer where a team, maybe you get a couple of bidders that are like, hey, we're going to roll the dice. Then you do create a bidding. And you're probably not going to get a benevolent offer of like a top prospect. Just hold on to him. Because again, teams know he's had 1 good season. Teams know that there's a real chance he could end up with the same fate as Yoan Moncada. And you can say, well, no, yes, LRJ truthers. Especially if Tim Anderson, who is beloved and produced actually multiple better seasons, can be bought out. And Moncada, who was injured a lot like Luis Robert Jr., can be bought out too. The same can happen to Luis Robert Jr. if he can't stay healthy or produce. So that's why I would like to hold on to him at least through the trade deadline. Well, the Sox could sort of replicate a last offseason move by signing a failed pitcher who revived his career in Korea again. Let's discuss who that pitcher is next on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I always maintain FanDuel's spreads, over, under, and money lines. They're fun to play, but if you want to win big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. Popular parlay for tonight's Cleveland and Denver game is the Denver Broncos spread at -5.5. The under of 42.5 points getting hit, and Cortland Sutton and Nick Chubb scoring an anytime touchdown. That is at plus 4,043. If you put, say, $10 on that and it hits, you could win $404.39. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so it cannot hurt to go to the well again and sign another pitcher who had to go to Korea to revive his career. That's what the Athletics' Andy McCullough is suggesting. He wrote that in his Black Friday free agent deal piece in the Athletic on Friday. It's funny that the Athletic, when the Sox are terrible, are somehow they have White Sox content. Now, granted, it was a paragraph blurb and it was all 39 teams, but remember the White Sox laid off James Fegan because they didn't think it was worth covering the White Sox daily. And then they had this historic losing season, and it seemed like the Athletic was pounding on the White Sox every day from August to September. So, if you want to get a subscription to The Athletic, still good for Chicago Blackhawks coverage and Chicago Bears coverage. But McCullough, he's suggesting in his Black Friday free agent deal piece that the Sox should pursue left-handed pitcher Kyle Hart. Now, my stance in when it comes to signing a starting pitcher this offseason, I just prefer the White Sox to give their young pitchers a runway. Give them, don't have anything clog their runway as starters. Let Kai Busch and Mason Adams compete for the 5th starting job in spring training and then give it to them. But if you are trading Garrett Crochet, you probably could use a veteran. Now, I'm not saying Kyle Hart will be the guy like, hey, guys, I'll show you how to do things because he had to go to Korea. But it can't hurt to have a veteran pitcher eat some innings if you're trading Garrett Crochet, and Hart might be able to do that. Also, I'll make an exception for Hart since it makes sense, given there's a good chance of crossover with Sox pitching head Brian Bannister, as both were in Boston last decade, and that's when Hart was in the Red Sox system, and Bannister was filling various pitching development and coaching roles. So I can't confirm that obviously Bannister specifically worked with Hart, but I'm sure that there is some sort of familiarity with each other. So it can't hurt if Brian Bannister is familiar with him and says, yeah, let's bring him in because in Brian Bannister, I trust. And if the Sox are going to replicate the Eric Fetty signing, Hart is the candidate. Fetty did credit Bannister as being the one of the voices who helped him transition effectively back to the States. Because remember, you can produce in Korea, but you got to come back and produce then in Major League Baseball. And Fetty said that Bannister was one of the guys that helped him. He also did credit Ethan Katz. So, maybe that combo can help Hart be like Eric Fetty. Hart didn't win the KBO's pitching triple crown like Fetty did, but he came close. He did set the KBO single season record for Ks with 182. He also posted a 2.69 ERA for the NC Dinos. He's also not some random free agent that McAuliffe just pulled out of thin air. I mean, Fangraphs has him in their top 50. They rank him as their 48th best available free agent. And here's what they wrote up. Across 157 innings with the Dinos, Hart posted a 2.69 ERA with a 1.03 whip while striking out 182 and walking just 38. The low slot lefty made some changes to how he deploys his arsenal compared to when he was last in affiliated ball. Hart was taking a slider first approach while he was with Seattle, but pitched more off of his 90-mile-per-hour fastball in Korea. It allowed his well-commanded slider, his best offering, to be used more often as a chase pitch. Hart's changeup generated plus chase and miss rates in 2024, but that pitch lives off his command of it rather than his pitch movement. Hart can vary the speed and shape of his breaking stuff by working in a cutter and a rarely thrown slow curveball. Hart looks like a 5th or 6th starter type, though there's a risk his fastball-oriented approach won't be viable against big league hitters due to his lack of velocity. Okay, so we've heard this fear of lack of velocity before with another White Sox pitcher, Drew Thorpe. And, he had 7 really good starts outside of his other, just basically bad rookie starts and having, bone chips in his elbow that eventually needed to be removed. So we've seen the White Sox work well, even with guys that don't have blazing fastballs. And you could be concerned, though, oh, man, another low fastball guy. But again, you got Bannister and Katz who could work on a way to get him to throw, to hit the corners, much like Drew Thorpe did. And unlike Thorpe, Thorpe is usually, trying to locate and command his fastball to set up his just devastating change. Hart would be mixing his slider and changeup to get outs. And he's got he's got a cutter. Now, obviously, if he's working with Bannister is probably going to be like, hey, let's find your 3 pitches that work well, and let's throw those 3 pitches a lot. But he has the size the Sox like out of their lefties at 6'5", slot angle too. They like those lefties with slot angles. And this is what Hart told MassLive.com as why he bounced back in Korea after being mostly a minor league pitcher in Boston, Philadelphia, and then Seattle. Hart points to 3 big factors for his success. First, NC coaches helped him rework his slider during spring training in Arizona, and the shape of it stayed consistent throughout the year. Second, Hart said that his fastball, which averaged 89.1 miles per hour back in 2020, had a higher velocity floor, about 91 miles per hour, while he could reach back and flash 93 or 94 if needed. Most importantly, Hart believes what his ability to settle into outings and pitch freely with the backdrop of having a guaranteed job and a rotation spot every 5 or 6 days. So, sounds like, some tweaks were done in Korea, much like tweaks were done for Fetty. A guaranteed job helps you feel much more comfortable. And if you're going to the Sox, who just won 41 games, and if there's a rotation spot, you're probably going to have guaranteed innings. I mean, they let Chris Flexen start the entire season. And Chris Flexen, as I keep saying, as everydayers have heard me, Chris Flexen was the epitome of he's going to put a lot of guys, he's going to put guys on base. You just got to hope and pray that he's going to minimize the damage. So, they have had a history of, hey, we just need some guys to eat innings. And Hart is a little different than Fetty in that Hart only had 4 career big league appearances in the big leagues, where Fetty had a body of work where he just failed and failed and failed and then had to go to Korea. Hart only made it to the big leagues in the pandemic shortened 2020 season, posts a 15.55 ERA. Although before the season, he battled Lyme disease. So, he explained why, maybe he had that 15.5 ERA. He explained it to, according to MassLive.com, quote, "When I got called up, there was a piece of me that was like, dude, you're physically not ready," Hart recalled. "I was so weak. A lot of my family will try to make an excuse that I wasn't totally recovered from the Lyme. I don't necessarily think that was the issue. I just finished the antibiotics, but I was weak. That was the biggest problem. I wasn't like sick. I wasn't just not recovered. It was embarrassing, not just for me, but for us as a club," end quote. Now, he also did win KBO's top pitching award, much like Eric Fetty did. Fangraphs, though, projects he could get a 3-year, $24 million deal. A bit high for someone that has only had 4 major league career appearances and, still has low velocity. But think about this. Frankie Montez just got $17 million for the next 2 seasons. That's just how the starting pitching market is working. It's getting crazy. I'd prefer maybe a 2-year deal like what Fetty got, or 2 in a club option. But he's definitely a guy I would pursue, especially if you're trading Garrett Crochet. Because right now, you're going to have, Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin, Drew Thorpe. I'd like to have Sean Burke. And then, why not have a competition with Hart and say Kai Bush, Mason Adams, Nick Nastrini, and Jairo Iriarte. And the losers, they go to the bullpen. Because especially if, Hart doesn't cut it as a starter, you can see if his off-speed stuff works as a long reliever. Well, let's keep the Minor League Monday recaps going of the team's top 30 prospects. Today, I want to explore if the team's 11th ranked prospect and former first-round pick Jacob Gonzalez is trending toward being a bust. I'll get to that after the break on Locked On White Sox. I saw Michael Jordan drop 55 at the old Chicago Stadium. Saw LeBron James drop double nickels too. Watched Devin Hester take a punt to the house, and it was amazing. Seeing a game live and in person is always a way to go, especially if you want to see legends play. The best place to get the best deal on tickets is using the Game Time app. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Pick filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Hey, I monitor the Game Time app for every Marquette basketball game in case I can convince my wife to go, since I gave up my season tickets to my alma mater years ago, and they've had prices for games as low as $1. So I still haven't been able to convince her because, I have family obligations, that type of stuff. Plus, I can get a panoramic view of a seat in the app before I buy, so I can know what the view is like. And the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Also, recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so I'm getting very concerned that Jacob Gonzalez is going to be a bust. I won't rate him there yet, as I want to see what new director of hitting Ryan Fuller does working with him. But I'm not sure Fuller will be working with him extensively, although I'd like to believe they'll get some work in together at spring training. So I still want to give Gonzalez the benefit of the doubt now that you brought in a director of hitting, to make sure that, hey, this is how we want to hit, or to analyze their swings and be like, hey, here's the adjustments we need to make. But I am concerned that Gonzalez will turn out to be, at the very least, another Danny Mendick, Zach Remillard, or Larry Garcia that the system keeps producing. The system is great at producing utility players. And it'd be fine if Gonzalez was drafted in the later rounds, but this was your number one, this was your first round pick in 2023. He cannot be another utility player. These are the picks that you got to start getting starters out of, especially if you're going to be going, undertaking the most monumental rebuild of all time. He might continue to represent the one critique of amateur scouting director Mike Shirley and the Sox organization as a whole, and that is they draft guys with high floors, but not high ceilings. At least that was the previous administration. That was what Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn did a lot. They drafted a lot of high floors, low ceiling guys like Nick Madrigal. And if you think Nick Madrigal should come back to the White Sox, I cannot help you. That was a terrible draft. Oh, he hit. He couldn't run the bases well. He was constantly hurt. Sorry. That was the only reason why they drafted him too. Well, he's got good bat-to-ball skills. And as we've seen, they're not exactly excellent. Just because he doesn't strike out doesn't mean he's a good baseball player. And especially with Gonzalez, too, that was a very high floor, low ceiling guys. Scouts questioned his athleticism. And he won the National Freshman of the Year award at Ole Miss. And he won a national championship the next season. But then, scouts started to look at him and were like, I don't know if he's very athletic. And the scouting report on him was great bat-to-ball skills with the possibility to develop power to hit 25 home runs, but below average speed. And the scouting report believes he may have to be moved to second or third because even though he's got nice long strides in the field, he's just not very fast and nimble enough. He's not wah, wah, wah. That type of stuff. And at Double-A, he struggled with his bat-to-ball skills. Although at least he cleared up fears that he may not hit above A ball like what we saw in 2023. That was a huge, huge warning sign. Because in 2023, he got some at-bats at Low A Kannapolis and hit just 207 with a 589 OPS. He did make some adjustments to his swing, and he hit 273 with a 763 OPS at High A, and that earned him a promotion to Double-A. So at least it was like, oh, good. All right. He can at least get to where now he's going to be amongst his peers. He's not a fringe prospect. That would have been a disaster had he been continuing to not hit at A ball. But he hit 225 with a 605 OPS, including a 284 on base percentage, with just 5 home runs at Double-A Birmingham. Although you gotta like his 304, 391, 366 slash line against lefties. So that's why I still get the possibility of a utility player vibes. Is at least there might be a backup there. If you can continue to hit left-handed pitching, maybe you bring him up at some point. He can be, on your bench. But he was a first-round pick. And he was especially a first-round pick when the contention window was slamming shut. When the team decided we got to offload our veterans. Even when Rick and Kenny decided, you know what, we got to trade guys away. He's a draft pick at the very beginning of a rebuild. And he should not be another, here's another utility infielder. Here's another Yomer Sanchez. Although, that is what Rick Hahn as a GM as the GM of these drafts produced. A lot of high floor guys that at least can get to the big leagues. That's another reason why you should be frustrated with the lack of spending by Jerry, because it's like, you got to at least draft guys that can get to the big leagues because we got to fill some holes because our owner won't spend money to bring in any viable free agents to plug anything that our system can't produce. So we at least got to get a big leaguer out of these drafts. And really in the first round, you want to get a high ceiling guys, And it's another example of why the team lacks impact bats. You want to get impact players in the first round. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to have to trade Garrett Crochet, because they don't have a lot of impact players. So hopefully Shirley was just being held back by the two and he can start drafting some more high ceiling guys. Gonzalez did hit 260 with a 730 OPS in August. Struggled in July with a 151 average and a 378 OPS. He was even worse in September with a 143 average and a 422 OPS. His best game did come at Double-A, though, on May 22nd when he went 3 for 5 with a homer and 2 runs against Biloxi. MLB.com's Ben Weinrib did select Gonzalez to be part of his exercise, though, where he selected players from each organization's top 30 to build his own top 30 list. And he did put Gonzalez at number 12. Here's what he wrote. Gonzalez became a 2023 first rounder after 3 productive seasons in the SEC, but has yet to hit his stride in the minors. The 22-year-old has continued to tinker with his stance to tap into natural power and recapture that potential, and his instincts and long strides could help him make him stick it short. So at least there's somebody out there that still thinks, hey, if I got to build a top 30, there's still some value there. However, if Colson Montgomery does turn out to be a shortstop, you might have to move him to second, and he did get some work there at Double-A. I think he's a long shot to finally be the Sox solution to replacing Ray Durham at second base. And remember, Ray Durham's been gone for almost 24 years. And again, I'd like to hope Ryan Fuller can fix him, but it's just trending to be Jacob Gonzalez is going to be nothing more than another Danny Mandick. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about what questions Chris Getz must answer this offseason, and also if the White Sox officially announced their coaching staff, because I'm just waiting for it to be officially announced. I know Daryl Van Schouwen had a report that most of the coaching staff will be returning, but they still haven't officially announced it. So I just want to wait for the official announcement and see, kind of what job Grady Sizemore will have. So if that's officially announced today, I'll discuss if Will Venable should have been allowed to hire his own staff. If it's not officially announced tomorrow or today, I'll get to when it's officially announced. And feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding if it's the right time to trade Luis Robert Jr., the Sox possibly repeating another Eric Fetty-like signing, and a minor league Monday recap of Jacob Gonzalez. You can leave those comments at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.